Hey now, we are getting over, and I am the Silver King, Adam Silverstein, here to lead you through these hard times. With episode 633 of your favorite professional wrestling podcast. That's right, Getting Over is back once again, and it is Thursday, so you know exactly what that means. We are here to break down everything that happened over the last week across NXT and AEW. This episode will serve as your NXT No Mercy 2024 Ultimate Preview, where the Silver King will break down every single match on the card, provide you with picks, predictions, and a pre-show expectation grade. We will be breaking down everything that has to do with NXT No Mercy. Of course, we will also be discussing the fallout from AEW All In and the quick 2-week turnaround to AEW All Out. So, as usual, there is an absolute ton to discuss on this edition of the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. That means we have no time to waste. So off the top, allow me to remind you that Getting Over
is all about the five.
Head over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Leave a 5-star rating on Apple. Take a little extra time. Leave a 5-star written review. If you do, we will read it live right here on the show. Don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube at Getting Overcast and follow us on Twitter at Getting Overcast for episode drops, news, analysis, highlights, all that good stuff. Twitter at Getting Overcast is where you can send in questions and comments for the show. It is also where you get to vote in our pre- and post-show polls surrounding premium live events and pay-per-views. You did it last week for AEW All In, and you're going to have the chance to do it this week for WWE Bash in Berlin and NXT No Mercy, both of which, of course, are transpiring this weekend. And while we're at it, please also remember,
I happen to love the number 5.
and I hope you do as well, because for $5 a month or $50 for the entire year, you can become an official Getting Overhead. Just visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Sign up. You'll get bonus audio, the fastest 5 minutes in professional wrestling, instant reactions to every major show, and exclusive news posts on Friday. Again, that is buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. One other brief note before we get into today's show, and that is about our schedule for the week. Already in your podcast feed is the WWE Bash in Berlin Ultimate Preview. Please make sure you listen to that if you have not already. Saturday, shortly after WWE Bash in Berlin goes off the air. Time slightly to be determined because it is week 1 for the college football season. And of course, the Silver King, vintage Chris Vanini, we have some other responsibilities. But at some point Saturday in the evening, we will have your WWE Bash in Berlin instant analysis. And then, of course, Sunday, after NXT No Mercy goes off the air, we will have an instant analysis for that as well. This is a 4-episode week here on Getting Over, and we're immediately circling back next week and giving you a 3-episode week because we have AEW All Out. So 3 extremely busy weeks of professional wrestling, and we are here to provide that performance-enhancing audio for your ear holes. Now, as far as the schedule on today's show, we're flipping things a little bit. Normally, we start with NXT, we move to AEW, but because this is a premium live event week for NXT, the main event of this episode will be the NXT No Mercy Ultimate Preview. That means we kick off with AEW, we cover the week in NXT that did not directly have to do with No Mercy, and then, of course, we dive into No Mercy itself. There are timestamps in the episode description, as there always are, so you can jump around if need be. But as always, I hope you listen to the entire show. So as I said, we're kicking it off with AEW. And there was actually, I would say, a dearth of wrestling on AEW TV this week. Only 4 matches on Dynamite because the show spent a lot of time building storylines for All Out. And because of that, AEW made just 5 of 16 matches across Dynamite, Collision, and Rampage storyline relevant this week. That's 31% and less than half of our goal for their creative. Rampage managed to go 0 for 5, which was quite an accomplishment on its own. Now, in terms of Dynamite on Wednesday, there were around 2,000 people, maybe 2,500 at most, in attendance. This was in a 15,000 seat arena coming off of AEW's biggest pay-per-view of the year, with fans knowing there's going to be a short 2-week build until All Out. So a lot of stuff would happen on the show. It was also in a market that was about 2 hours from Chicago, which used to be AEW's hottest market, and by the way, is the host of AEW All Out. Now, it's a college town for Illinois, absolutely, but filling a normal-sized arena, only 1/6 of capacity, coming off of All In, that's just straight up rough. The crowd probably did its best, but the energy was low, and you could feel that lack of passion throughout the entire episode. Nearly every segment was worse off than it would have been in a different location because of the crowd. And that's not the fault of the performers. It's just the facts of what happened, despite the show being star-studded with most major names in attendance and even a significant return at the top. So that's an overview of AEW this week. Of course, not referring to All In itself. Let's go ahead and break down everything that happened on Dynamite, Collision, and to a lesser extent, of course, Rampage. Dynamite closed with Bryan Danielson in the last segment. He was scheduled to address his future. Danielson looked great, carrying the title as we always knew he would. He got the best reaction of the night, excited about winning the AEW title, relaying that his daughter called it the best day of her life, though she also went on a bus tour with Peppa Pig. He said it was the favorite moment of his entire career and briefly got choked up. Now, I don't doubt that, but at the same time, I kind of do. Danielson reiterated that his AEW contract has expired. He needs neck surgery soon before the end of the year, and his family is ready for him to come home. But AEW is awesome, and it has made both pro wrestling and his life better. So he realized he cannot retire as champion. His full-time career will officially end once he loses the title. Jack Perry, of all people, interrupted on the big screen, putting himself over for every success he's had since returning to AEW. He said his future was to retire Danielson, and we learned it was a tape promo because Jack simultaneously attacked Bryan from behind. Then he held up both titles, and the show pretty much just ended from there. I'm always a sucker for the video fake out into an attack, and with the EVPs having truck access, even if it wasn't like explained on television, it played for me. Danielson was great in his promo. It was perhaps the best part of Dynamite on Wednesday. Not that anyone should have expected he would do anything else than what he promised. I mean, it was clear he wasn't going to just relinquish the strap, but he still did extremely well, kind of taking the crowd through his story. But holy shit, talk about ending it with a wet fart. Why do we have yet another current title holder challenging for another championship? We just saw this with the AEW title and the international title. We've seen it with the trios titles recently and the tag team titles on Collision. And it's also happening with the international championship even now on the same show. There are 200 people on this roster, and there's tons of folks who could be elevated by fighting Bryan, but it's Jack. Now, the only explanation I can muster is that this is either not going to main event the show because of something else already booked that we're going to talk about in a moment, or Tony Khan believes Jack is going to have so much heat in Chicago due to CM Punk still, and he wants to capitalize on that for the spectacle, and he wants fans chanting CM Punk in the main event, or hopes they chant fuck CM Punk, which I don't think would happen. It does make sense in kayfabe that Jack beat a number one contender in Darby Allin, and therefore wants the shot that Darby is going to get, but he didn't really articulate that, and he's jumping the line ahead of two other number one contenders in Darby and Christian Cage. So again, coming out of All Out, there are literally 3 number one contenders for the AEW title. Oh, and not for nothing, the fact that Tony, who should hate the Elite and have every reason to prevent this from happening, is just okay with it, that again doesn't track with the entire Elite storyline. Maybe that shit's over. We will see. Jon Moxley opened Dynamite, coming out to completely different music, neither Wild Thing nor his other themes. And as you all know, I've said it many times on the podcast, not using Wild Thing was music to my ears. It didn't fit him. It was forced from the beginning. His other music was much better. That was really the main problem. His other music was better. He had a serious glare on his face, and commentary made a huge deal, over the top even, about his disposition. Mox said he was there looking for Darby, saying it was time they had a talk, even though he knew he wasn't in the arena. Then he feigned leaving and told Tony Schiavone to his face, "This is not your company anymore." Then the camera strangely zoomed in on this random CM Punk fan in a cowboy hat who stood up at the perfect time as if it was meant to happen. Later backstage, Mox was asked what he meant in the ring. He responded, thou shalt not cast pearls before swine, meaning don't waste good things on people who will not appreciate them. Then Marina Shafir, now with dyed red hair, beat up a few dudes with Mox calling it a lesson in humility. She shoved the cameraman. He was able to keep his shot, and it pretty much ended. Now, you want to talk about some way over-the-top dramatic shit? That's what this was. Sounds like it's hopefully going to make sense of Darby taking a big L at All In, presumably Mox giving Darby a stern talking to, raising his ire, convincing him he needs to stay aggressive without Sting, he can succeed without him, stuff like that. Maybe even inviting him to join a newer, refreshed faction, a fighting club, something similar. But that was an interesting turn of phrase for Mox, given he basically is an AEW original who people consider the heart and soul of the place. Who exactly is he planning to take the company from? The owner that he loves? Plus, are we really getting another company takeover angle when the Elite bullshit is seemingly still ongoing? And did he mix up his Tonys? Why would he say that to Shivani, who has absolutely no stake whatsoever in AEW? The Shafir bit was super lackluster. It was very indie wrestling in terms of execution. I know Mox loves shoot fighting. I know he's a huge fan of her and thinks her ceiling is higher than has been seen to date. But for me, it's always been immensely low, and they need to stop trying to make Marina Shafir happen.
Stop trying to make fetch happen. It's not going to happen.
Now, I'm not going to judge this further until we see what it's about, especially because Mox storylines usually hit. But first impressions were lackluster. I'm glad he's actually doing something different from a gimmick standpoint, though. And Mox physically looked way better than he has in a long time. It was nice to see him that well put together, just given some of what he has gone through of late. Clearly, he's rested and relaxed, and he's been able to kind of give himself a makeover to a degree. Now, I saw some people theorizing all of this might be referring to Shane McMahon. It is certainly possible. Wrestling is crazy. And I've long said I would be here for a one-off Shane appearance just for the absurdity of it. The fact that we could say in 2024, a McMahon appeared on another wrestling show, WWE's biggest competitor since WCW. On the other hand, using him with any regularity would be odd. It's almost as if everyone has forgotten how terrible he was. Forget in the ring, on the mic over his last few appearances. Do you remember that Braun Strowman segment? There might be something to the idea of Shane and Mox leading a shoot fighting club, because if you remember, Shane originally wanted Vince to buy UFC back in the day, and obviously he has that history with Raw Underground, but I don't know that Raw Underground is the memory you're going to want to be bringing back and putting Shane on television. And then I just think, like, does it make any sense for AEW? And will it bring any viewers outside of 1 week? And also, will it make any sense in storyline? What do Mox and Shane, or what would Mox and Shane have in common other than potentially a distaste for WWE? And as I said before, why would Mox want to take the company away from a guy in Tony who he said saved the business and his career? We've talked about this before. If the company is a heel, like WWE used to be, you can pretty much do whatever you want. When the company and owner are supposed to be mega baby faces who everyone praises and they chant the name of the organization, what onus is there on wrestlers to rebel against them? Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. Those were my immediate thoughts coming out of this. On Dynamite, Hangman Page fought Tomohiro Ishii. Chop fest early. Ishii took a DDT on the ring apron with a fun cell literally standing on his head. Obviously, who's also holding the bottom rope. Ishii did his standard no-selling of power moves and then did a jumping deadeye in which Page nearly broke his neck for real. No exaggeration. A couple inches to the side, we are having a totally different conversation today. Hangman came back hitting Ishii with a safe deadeye and then buckshot lariat for the win. Hard-fought match. It had its moments. It was quite slow and plodding for a show opener. Important win for Hangman, though, just because he's had a series of losses and definitely needed a decent win. Swerve Strickland went face-to-face with Page after the bell, saying he deserved a beating for getting involved in his title match, but instead, he just felt pity that Hangman has become a child throwing tantrums, moving himself further away from the title. Hangman started screaming, calling Swerve a piece of shit who broke into his home, never beat him clean. Hangman alluded to it, but Swerve ultimately challenged to a steel cage match. Swerve shared that he actually went back to Hangman's house the day his wife gave birth to their second child, which somehow reminded him to focus on the AEW title instead. Then he asked Hangman what kind of man he'll be in the steel cage, and Page just left dejected. This segment went twice as long as necessary, and the longer Swerve spoke, the more he said, the more convoluted it got. He should have just made his point clearly. Hangman's focus shifting to Swerve has only led to failure, not titles, so he should just worry about being a father rather than trying to become champion again. Feel like I just said it more clearly and succinctly there than the entirety of this segment. This was one of the moments Wednesday where the tiny crowd actually made the segment worse. But the part that irked me the most is that Hangman's presence was antithetical to everything we have seen from him since he returned. The guy has been unhinged, out for blood, trying whatever possible to get his hands on Swerve. I mean, he handcuffed him to the blood and guts cage and beat the ever-loving shit out of him. Here, he has Swerve coming to the ring, storming at him, doesn't go after him when he entered. He stood there taking his verbal abuse the entire time. It would have hit so much harder if initially he was physically restrained by security in the corner or something as Swerve spoke, and he had to cut his promo with someone holding a microphone to his mouth while security were holding him back. Now, that said, the steel cage booking is perfect. It's necessary. The match is going to be great, and this is the one that I was referencing earlier when I said Danielson and Perry maybe shouldn't main event All Out. It shouldn't, because this should. Swerve and Hangman's a bigger match, and it's going to be a better match, just straight up. So that at least is my expectation coming in. And I'll also remind, just like with Drew McIntyre in WWE, but really even more so, Hangman has done nothing wrong. Everything he says is truthful. He didn't get beat clean. Swerve did invade his house. And people started booing Hangman because they started liking Swerve. So it's bullshit that he has to, in kayfabe, deal with all of this when he is actually the good guy in this feud. I digress. On Dynamite, MJF came out with Kinzio tape under his suit, angry he lost his ring and his title, claiming he has 2 herniated discs and denouncing his American citizenship other than, of course, Long Island. He said AEW is a circus without him and claimed Will Ospreay cheated, promising he will cost Ospreay the AEW title whenever he ultimately goes for it. Then he started screaming and threatening Daniel Garcia, only to get attacked from behind by Garcia with a guillotine. MJF passed out in literal seconds, which was unrealistic. Garcia then tried to pile drive his dead body off the second rope, but security stopped him from doing it not once but twice. He claimed he stole and pawned off the ring to pay for a flight to London. Does Tony not provide international travel to talent? Does he not pay him well enough to afford a plane ticket? Garcia said ruining MJF's life is now his fetish, and they are fighting it all out, with Garcia's goal solely being breaking his neck. He also threw a microphone straight at MJF's head right down the ramp, and he nailed him, which was super impressive. One of the most fun moments of the entire show. This would have been hotter in front of a better, larger crowd, and it will ultimately be hot in Chicago. Another example of a segment going twice as long as necessary on this episode. The part about the ring was dumb. Both guys had decent but unremarkable promos, though I will say Garcia, he showed some passion and fire that's been missing from his speaking of late. It was all just okay, but we're getting the match we wanted in the end. On Dynamite, Ricochet fought Kyle Fletcher. There was a brief taped promo from Ricochet saying he's excited to give fans what they want after they've waited a while for him to do so. A unique WWE held him back message. Ricochet did a springboard off the barricade, and upon landing, a crotch chopped right into the camera. Clearly, he's free from the shackles, so he needs to tell Paul Levesque to suck it, even though the guy chose to leave and he didn't get released. So odd. He did a Northern Lights suplex into a spinning vertical suplex, running shooting star press, rolling dropkick, and Death Valley driver. Ricochet ultimately won with Vertigo, which was the lone move in this match that he did not previously do as part of his normal repertoire in WWE. Easily the TV match of the week in AEW, but still somehow underwhelming compared to my expectation for Ricochet being unchained. For lack of a better term, I went 4 stars, A-. Ospreay entered after the bell, and I shit you not, this guy was literally wearing a Wear the Best Wrestle t-shirt.
Come on, Oos. It's a joke, right? It's a joke, Oos. You ribbing me?
He was presumably going to say something to his friend, Ricochet, when Pac ran in from behind with a poison Rana straight on the stage. Pac warned Ospreay not to look past him before welcoming Ricochet to AEW and sending him to the back of the line. This was my favorite moment on Dynamite by a decent margin. I rolled my eyes. at Ospreay immediately coming out for Ricochet, I nearly lost my vision for how far they rolled back when I saw that shirt. But Pac's Poison Rana and the way that was shot, it was spectacular. What a visual. These three would put on a tremendous triple threat, and maybe we'll actually get that after the All Out match, which itself should be a banger. But the idea of Ricochet and Pac and Ospreay and Pac and all three of them together, really any combination of those three is going to be fantastic. It's only been 2 appearances. You know, I've been relatively unimpressed with the uncaged Ricochet to this point, just based on the way people juiced him up. Pac deserves this title match, and it was set in motion long before he won the trios titles. But to be factual, this is another example of a current champion challenging for another title. But I guess when the vast majority of your roster are champions, that's bound to happen. On Dynamite, Mariah May hit the stage for an interview, saying her championship celebration would be delayed and held in a better town. They were in Champlain, Illinois, so I don't really blame her for that. She tried a ton of cheap heat, taking some quality shots at the crowd, saying the town desperately needed some glamour. Then she disrobed, unveiling her wearing black lingerie with a title around her waist. There was a really cute shot of a little girl putting a sign over her father's eyes so he didn't look at her. I thought that was pretty funny. The segment literally just ended after that. Super weak opening segment for the new champion. Look, we know she's hot, and I certainly have no problem whatsoever with her showing off that she's hot.
Gonna look good, but she's got me saying, hey now!
But there was absolutely zero substance to this. And it wasn't even the start of a setup or a new feud or anything of value. It was just, look at my body, which again, as a man,
that's cool.
But as a wrestling, critic or whatever you want to call me,
dude, not cool.
On Dynamite, Mercedes Moné had a championship celebration that Private Party interrupted, saying she can't be throwing parties around there without him. It started contentious, but they started praising her, which led to her softening. Then Mark Quinn started spitting some game, only for Kazuchika Okada to step in, teaching Moné how to say sayonara, bitches. This was a very WWE segment, but not like 2024 WWE. Like the era in which we all rolled our eyes at dumb backstage stuff. And Okada here, he was the paradigm of what a section of fans were worried about him becoming if he did join WWE instead of AEW. I enjoyed Party interacting with Mercedes. The promos were so robotic and scripted. The entire segment, it was just an eye roll. On Dynamite, Jamie Hayter beat Harley Cameron. Footage was shown of Hayter's last appearance when the Outcasts took her out, so she probably should have fought Saraya here, given Harley was not part of that group. But this was set up at All In when Jamie returned during 0 Hour for some strange reason. Cameron took Haterade for an obvious dominant victory. Looks like they're going to move to a match against Saraya coming up after this, and that is a positive. Now, in terms of people calling Hayter Timu Becky Lynch, look, if I'm being honest, I see it, okay? The red hair, the pale skin, the colors of her gear, it reminds you of a young Bex. I highly doubt it's intentional, but I so preferred her old look, which was far more unique with the blonde bangs and the darker hair in the back. And I don't know why you would go away and come back looking so drastically different when that version of Jamie Hayter was immensely over and what everyone wanted. Are we having too long of a conversation about hair color? Almost certainly. But this made her look more generic, whereas the other look was far more unique. And what AEW needs most is unique characters. On Dynamite, grizzled young vets were cutting a promo backstage at All In when the Young Bucks came up cheering for them, thinking they were talking to other teams, not them. GYV clarified that they were coming for them as well, with Zach Gibson cutting his typically strong promo. That transitioned into another promo, supposedly being cut live on Dynamite. They said they're not messing around and would run through an unlucky team Friday. They said they had no idea who they would be fighting. And right as they said that, a bottom third graphic popped up showing it would be the Outrunners, which was hysterical that they could be cutting a live promo, not knowing their opponent, yet we as viewers do. Their tagline is Grit Your Teeth, which is GYT, not GYV, but I digress. Happy they're signed full-time. WWE cutting them was a massive mistake. I said that at the beginning. They should help rebuild this lacking tag team division, but I am kind of curious to see how far they go and how long AEW has their back in terms of as a top tag team. On Collision, Willow Nightingale beat Harley in 4 minutes. Hey, 2 contracted women talents wrestling on Collision. That's cool. On Collision, Chris Statlander gave Stokely Hathaway some tough love training. Thought it would be funnier. It really wasn't. They teamed up to beat a couple jobbers later. Stoke had Black Panther gear, hit a spinebuster. Stat wrestled the man, hitting a blue thunder bomb before throwing Stoke on top for the win. Now, I didn't cover this mixed tag team match during the All In instant analysis because I missed it live, but I did get to watch it before today's show. So at All In, we had Willow and Ishii against Stat and Stoke. Hathaway came out in Michael Jackson-style gear, which was definitely a decision. The women wrestled most of the match as expected. Stat hit a blue thunder bomb, but ate Death Valley Driver. Ishii appropriately no-sold Stoke, so Stat hit him and ran him into Stoke spinebuster that Ishii also no-sold. Stat broke a fall after a powerbomb, and Willow no-sold the German suplex. There's a trend here, with Ishii hitting a basement lariat for the win. Nothing special, an appropriate kickoff show match, 2 stars, C-. On Rampage, Hikaru Shida backstage took exception to the insinuation that Mercedes beat her clean last week. She declared she will become champion again and not remain an afterthought because she's the ace of the division. It was actually a really good promo from Shida, refreshing. On Rampage, the conglomeration beat Brian Cage, Johnny TV, and the Beast Mordos in 12 minutes. This was a real match that happened. On Rampage, Roderick Strong beat Fuego del Sol, remember him, in 3 minutes. On Rampage, the Gates of Agony beat Iron Savages in 3 minutes. On Rampage, the Von Erichs beat the Outrunners in 10 minutes. Undisputed Kingdom and Gates of Agony attacked after the bell. Conglomeration saved, and this built a thrown-together 0-hour match. On Collision, Conglomeration beat Undisputed Kingdom in 15 minutes. Relevant to storyline, but very repetitive booking. Entertaining overall, it was the second best match on the show. On Dynamite, Mark Briscoe did his normal promo with Conglomeration saying a bunch of nothing. Hook was there too. Speaking of someone who says nothing, Willow announced she would do a Chicago street fight against Stat, but CMLL would not sanction it. So does that mean the title is no longer on the line? I guess so, right? Anyway, also on Dynamite, the Conglomeration and Hook fought the Learning Tree and Strong. Chris Jericho said Hook won back the FTW title because he took his advice. Strong was excited to be part of the Jericho Vortex for one night and asked for his help to get Kyle O'Reilly away from Orange Cassidy. Big Bill had a nice hot tag with a swinging boss man slam, but Hook caught him with an overhead suplex. Briscoe did his chair-assisted tope. Hook then locked in Red Rum. Strong's foot was clearly under the bottom rope the entire time, but the referee counted him as tapping out and called the submission. It was blatant, frankly, a dumb miss for the top official in the entire company. Kingdom attacked Hook after the bell. Then they hoisted Strong on their shoulders and he held up the FTW title. So this guy who was international champion and is part of this absolutely disastrous group is now going after Hook in the FTW title. Not really that exciting. I guess Strong will give him a good match. Don't mind the Conglomeration, but they've just been doing versions of this match across every show for months now. And as a viewer, it's exhausting. On Collision, Katsuyori Shibata beat Jay Lethal in 9 minutes. It was a pretty cool match from the standpoint that I never expected to see it happen. Shibata used the Iron Claw into an armbar for the submission. On Collision, Jeff Jarrett beat Arya Davari in 9 minutes. Why? Because. And on Rampage, Mina Shirakawa beat Robin Renegade in 8 minutes. 2 non-contracted women as the only match on that show. So that wraps up AEW this week. Clearly, despite Rampage and Collision directly building to All In, those shows were just worthless, except for building 0-hour matches. And you can only roll your eyes at that. Dynamite, a lot happened. A lot of it positive. Some of it, confusing, worthy of questioning. But that crowd just killed the show. It did. I'm excited to see what Dynamite looks like next week. And the card for AEW All Out is really strong. So we're going to have our AEW All Out Ultimate Preview next week. And I think I'm going to have a pretty high expectation grade when that part of the show comes around. So with that, let's go ahead and move over to NXT. As mentioned, we're going to start by discussing everything that happened on the show that doesn't directly relate to No Mercy. And then on the back end, we will have your NXT No Mercy Ultimate Preview. Pete Dunne backstage said obtaining the NXT Championship was still his goal, but he's not going to bitch and moan about losing the number 1 contendership. Rather, he's going to teach Trick Williams that messing with the bruiserweight leads to a beatdown. Joe Hendry later thanked Williams backstage for his assist last week and promised him the first shot at the NXT title after he beats Ethan Page. So it seems like they're going to be wrestling next week on TV. Surprised this is not on the No Mercy card instead of the Women's North American Championship. I get the decision, just disagree with it given the potential match quality and the relevance of both guys. Metaphor fought Fatal Influence. Both teams got brief pre-match promos. The heels debuted as a unit with a better name, logo, gimmick, and entrance theme in direct comparison to Pure Fusion Collective. Theme was dope, actually. Lash Legend booted the hell out of Jasmine Nix outside as she tried to get involved. That allowed JC Jane to catch her with a discus forearm before the heels combined for a high-low type of move, but it was a Shining Wizard pump knee combo. It was actually pretty cool for the win. Nice take on that standard style finisher. I'll stop saying this eventually, but they still don't make a lot of sense as a team. No doubting that Fallon Henley did well as a team with JC Jane here. But again, why? There's not a tag team title for the women in NXT anymore. Unless they're going to bring that back or actually have the main roster champions come down, I don't know why they needed another women's team. Oro Mensah tried to gas up the ladies backstage after their loss, the Metaphor ladies, of course. Lexis King cut in, laughing about Noam Dar being a lost father figure to him. So Mensah shot back that King doesn't even have a father. That led to a smack across the face and a broken up brawl. Certainly did not expect NXT to play that card in that way, but it did work to create actual vitriol between the two. No Quarter Catch Crew fought D'Angelo family in a 6-person mixed tag team match. Ren Sinclair tried to join the guys' tandem warm-up, then told them just to follow her lead. Charlie Dempsey obviously denied, saying he's the Heritage Cup champion and the leader, but she reminded of her role in the victory. 2 Goombas tried to talk to Tony D'Angelo, but he denied them as the family was preparing. They interrupted the match to pull Tony from ringside before the family hit stereo open leg drops. Miles Bourne worked Stack's injured knee, with Dempsey adding a heel hook reverse choke. Luca Crucifino cleared house on a hot tag. Ren broke a men's fall and then ate a tope suicida from Adriana Rizzo, who then fireman's carry tossed Dempsey ringside before the family hit Shatter Machine on Bourne for the win. I did not expect about 50% of what happened in this match to go down, and I certainly did not expect the family to beat NQCC. Rizzo showing out and murking Dempsey, the family winning straight up, Shatter Machine getting broken out as a finisher. All of it, cool. Super fun mixed tag. It over-delivered to expectation. I'm enjoying these groups. I hope they keep working together. Javon Evans fought Joe Coffey. Javon backstage got caught dancing like Shawn Michaels. He did a brief interview showing some personality. Evans hit a Superman punch before that bouncing kick off the ropes and a springboard clothesline. Coffey caught him midair for a German suplex, adding Glasgow send-off. Evans caught a second attempt, but Coffey countered him flying with a European uppercut before being caught himself flying with half a cutter. Javon added the double jump cutter for a false finish and a swanton bomb into Gallus standing outside. Wolfgang distracted the referee. That allowed Mark Coffey to eat another jumping cutter as Joe caught Javon with all the best for the bells to earn the victory. Fun, not as fluid as I would have expected. A bit surprised Javon was booked this strong. I know he's super over. I know no one wants him to lose, but he's going to have to lose. The guy needs to take legitimate L's at some point in his career. There's no better time to do that than now when he's 20 years old. I'd have booked Coffey to beat him relatively clean. Maybe an early distraction to prevent a pin, but then Joe gets it done on his own over the remaining few minutes. Even better would have been Javon going 2-1 against the Gallus boys over a series of weeks, then enlisting some help to overcome them in the end. Fine overall, just not what I would do. I also said 2-1 in my example. I meant 1-2, him losing more than he won against them. That would be more interesting for me. Carmen Petrovic fought Izzy Dame. Izzy delivered a really nice falling spinebuster and torture rack. Carmen came back with a basement roundhouse kick and a discus lariat. Izzy tried to hit a swinging move. I believe it was her finisher, but Carmen countered into a seated pinning combination for the victory. Pure developmental match, really not much to take away from it. Both flashed a bit. They still operate slowly in the ring. Eddie Thorpe was showing off footage of a recent DJ gig to a few ladies when Ashanti the Adonis came in trying to run game. He asked which one Thorpe was hitting, but he basically said they're just friends. Adonis could not believe that. Idris Enofe walked by in the background with Brooks Jensen following him and eventually attacking him with a steel chair. Adonis is a total hornball. The gimmick is so great. Obviously, the Jensen attack was on behalf of Shawn Spears from last week, and I would assume that we're going to get a tag team match between those 4 guys coming up sooner than later. Malik Blade fought Jensen. Blade ran Jensen into the steel steps for one of the loudest thuds I can remember on such a move. Blade hit a middle rope blockbuster, but Jensen got knees up to block a frog splash. He added a spike DDT and an elbow drop for the win. Lackluster match. Really did nothing to get me to buy into Jensen as any type of threat. I maintain what I've said about him forever. I'm not going to repeat it every single week. I just really don't believe the ceiling is that high. And this new gimmick, I thought maybe they would have some meat to chew on here. I'm just not seeing it. Hank and Tank were gassing each other up about their social media success backstage. Out the Mud came up talking shit. They were focused on likes, not gold. They said the faces were focused on likes, not gold. Short and sweet build to a match, presumably coming next week. Actually interested to see these 4 go at it. So that was everything that happened on NXT that did not directly relate to NXT No Mercy. That allows us to slide into our ultimate preview of this premium live event. As mentioned, we will break down every single match on the card, provide you with a prediction, and at the end, a pre-show expectation grade. Let's start with the only non-title match on the card, Wes Lee against Zach Wentz. There was a thorough and extremely well done MSK retrospective about the team's rise and fall in NXT, the fall, of course, due to Wentz's firing, along with the individual success, injury, and return of Lee prior to his heel turn. In other words, it was comprehensive. Later was a face-off between the guys with security lining the ring. Wentz was infuriated that Lee was willing to piss away a decade of friendship. Wes said he knows he's a bigger star and Zach is straight up jealous because they're on different levels. Wentz admitted he screwed up 2 years ago, saying it motivated him to grow and reunite with Lee. Zach reminded that the Rascals stopped Wes from quitting NXT for the third time and that he had more success with Trey Miguel in TNA than he did with Wes. Wes finally hit the WWE Superstar versus TNA wrestler line that I suggested last week. I mean, he literally said it verbatim, and they literally went face to face from there. At times, this was the best Wes has been on the mic since returning from injury, and probably one of the best presentations to date of him as a singles wrestler. But he also repeated the different levels line 3 times, so he either got lost or he was unscripted and straight up ran out of ammunition. Wentz largely cooked him head-to-head in the promo battle, but the passion and aggression that both guys showed absolutely amped up the intensity and sold the match. I loved how they mentioned Wes never winning a title in TNA as a sore spot, especially now that Zach has that over him. And the way the promo flowed kind of proved Wes's point that Zach is trying to use this as a springboard back to WWE while Wes is comfortable in his own skin and in his position with the company now. There's a chance this surprises and steals the show on Sunday. My guess is they won't give it enough time to allow that to happen on purpose because there's bigger matches on the card. But just from a pure wrestling standpoint, these two going at it could be absolutely spectacular. Now, in terms of who's going to win, look, we've had a long conversation here on this podcast about the NXT TNA relationship and how even though NXT has featured the bigger TNA stars on its television, NXT talent does not have a single clean victory over TNA talent to date. When it comes to major featured matches, that is absolutely going to change here. It simply, to me, does not make sense to run this angle where one half of a tag team in a competing company comes in and beats a guy who was your longest reigning, I believe, North American champion, and also someone who one would believe is about to get elevated into the main event scene in a more regular fashion going forward. So for all of those reasons, I have Wes Lee beating Zach Wentz here, and there are a number of matches on this card where I could easily see things going both ways. This is just not one of them. This is probably the most confident pick that I have on the entire show. Wes over Zach. The tag team championships will be on the line. Chase U defending against Fraxium. Chase U celebrated their title win in the classroom with Duke Hudson and Riley Osborne dejected in their failure to stop Fraxium. Ridge Holland said he would do whatever it takes to retain the titles before the now challengers walked in, saying they're fans of Chase U and what they're doing, but they have no choice but to pull the university down on Sunday. This felt a bit unnecessary and kind of jammed into the show. It didn't accomplish much at all. Perhaps it would have been better saved as a building block on No Mercy itself. Now, in terms of picking this match, I just said that Wes and Wentz is the easiest call. I actually think this is the most difficult. Because if you're going to do this title change, and I'm all for doing title changes on television, it makes the show more exciting, gives people a reason to tune into TV on a more regular basis. But if you were going to do a title change here, why would you not do it at No Mercy given the short time period? Like, why would you run it on TV and then just immediately do a rematch? On the other hand, you look at Fraxium and how much success they've had, and you say they could get called up to the main roster tomorrow. They're both young dudes. Don't get it twisted. They could still continue in NXT for another year, maybe even 2 when it comes to Nathan Frazier. Like if you want him especially to go for the main title or get pushed as a single. But the main roster needs tag teams. And they're as exciting as any in the entire company. I've argued recently they're the best tag team in the entire company. So I don't think a main roster call-up would be odd. The way I look at this, though, is we just went through a whole bunch of TV with a whole bunch of title matches. No titles changed hands. until the last match. That was Chase U beating Fraxium. Now we're here at a premium live event, and there's 5 title matches on the card. And really, I don't see any of the other 4, spoiler alert, changing hands. At least that's not going to be my prediction. So are you really going to go, 3 weeks or 4 weeks where you have, I don't have the exact number, but 12 title matches across TV and a premium live event, and only one title changes hands one time? I don't see that. I think there's a great chance that Fraxium comes back, wins the titles from Chase U. It's been a long time since WWE has done a quick title change where a team or a person wins it and then drops it back to the same person. I can't even tell you the last time that's happened. So I think there's a legitimate shot that Fraxium comes out of here with the titles, and that leads to the Ridge Holland separation from Chase U story that it feels like they're ready to tell, because I don't know how much more goodwill there is with him and that entire group. I don't know how much longer you can tell that version of the story. Just like JC Jane's involvement had to end at some point, it feels like the Ridge Holland involvement kind of needs to end now. I could be wrong. Chase U could walk out. They could stay champion for 3, 4, 5, 6 months. And I'll be looking back at this and saying, what the hell was I thinking with that prediction? But when I look at this card and I figure what title would make the most sense to change hands, it's this one. Because again, Fraxium, best tag team in NXT, and you could argue best tag team in the entire company right now. The Women's North American Championship will be on the line. Kalani Jordan defending against Wendy Chu. Lani hit the ring, demanding to know which of Wendy's creepy friends was scheduled to fight her. Chu appeared on the Titantron with the camera panning back to reveal an unknown figure who soon entered, and to the surprise of everyone, it was Rosemary from TNA Wrestling. Now, perhaps I missed where there was a match scheduled for Jordan, because for me, this came out of nowhere. But it was an excellent surprise. For those who do not know, Rosemary's a TNA legend. She won the women's title there in 2016. She served as a 4-time women's tag team champion. She also tagged as champion alongside WWE women's trainer Sarah Del Rey back in Shimmer, all the way back in the day. So very cool. Quite a moment for her to debut in WWE. And I'm sure Sarah, she also goes by Sarah Amato, I'm sure that was probably a really cool moment backstage behind the scenes for both of them. Lani hit a step-over leg lariat similar to Rob Van Dam and a cartwheel back elbow plus a flatliner. Rosemary speared her as Lani attempted a handspring, but she booted her from the corner and hit one of a kind to win the non-title match. Unfortunately, she didn't nail it totally clean, hit the legs. This was the first win by an NXT superstar over a TNA wrestler, clean, since the talent agreement began. The lights went out after the bell, with Wendy's face appearing on the NXT screens as she laughed over the speakers. Chu knocked out Lani with a sleeper-style chokehold as Rosemary laughed in the corner, but Lani was basically awake immediately after as she released the hold. This was solid enough to build for the match. Rosemary was an unexpected surprise, and it was great to see her get a really strong pop from the Orlando crowd. It seems like she might have a run alongside Wendy, maybe across both brands. Chu getting up on Jordan before the big show, that was necessary to prove her as a threat. Unfortunately, Lani's character and promo struggles, they continued. She's such a squeaky clean babyface that it's tough to buy into her as a serious competitor. She presents herself as a wrestler who lucked into her title and is out of her depth. And here, she completely failed to sell the chokehold at the end. You can't get choked out and then immediately open your eyes and start wiggling around. I repeat this. I like Lani. She's got skills in the ring. There's some kind of future there. But the title is not making the woman in this case. And she's certainly not making the title either, which was important because they're trying to establish the Women's North American Championship. It needed to go to someone who could say this is a title that is meaningful. The people who are competing for this are some of the top wrestlers on the entire brand. And that is not what Lani is giving off right now. I maintain that it was the wrong decision to strap her up. Hopefully she's going to develop further when she gives it up. But there were so many other options on the brand to go with. And to this point, again, the title hasn't made Lani, and Lani hasn't made the title. At the same time, I don't know that putting it on Wendy Chu would be the right decision. I like Wendy too. There's probably been, I don't want to say no bigger supporter of her because I don't know everyone's opinion on Wendy, but when she debuted her gimmick, I at first was hesitant, and then I was like, you know what? This is pretty effing genius. And while I'm not a huge fan of this heel turn it's taken, the darker turn, the sleep paralysis demon version of Wendy Chu that has now been put on our screen, even so, I like her. and I would love for her to get an opportunity. It just doesn't seem like it fits this title, this storyline, and her beating Lonnie as the champion. So I do have Lonnie retaining the women's North American title coming out of this match. The men's North American championship is also going to be defended. Oba Femi against Tony D'Angelo. The emergency D'Angelo had to address that we mentioned earlier, that was Femi invading his Italian restaurant and stealing his table. Oba looked really sharp as a heel in a vest and a button down. Tony was impressed with his gumption. Oba said he doesn't need his acceptance because D'Angelo may be the Don of NXT, but he's the ruler and he refuses to be disrespected. Femi stood up as D'Angelo was speaking, saying he would do his talking Sunday, but Tony countered it by promising to prove that Oba is mortal when he takes the title. Now, I wouldn't mind NXT doing something different than almost always defaulting to someone showing up at the restaurant when they need to make a statement in a feud with D'Angelo. And because of that, it was kind of the second weakest build on the go-home next to the tag team title match. But I have high hopes for this bout. I think D'Angelo has a chance to get a high-quality battle out of Femi. We saw that huge spinebuster last week. And really, if they had built this up more, and I apologize as you're listening to this podcast, the skies have opened up. It is thundering and lightning and pouring outside of my window. So if you're hearing anything in the background, that's exactly what it is. I apologize for even interrupting my take. But getting back to what I was saying with D'Angelo, if this had a longer build and there was more tension between the two of them, I might have actually taken D'Angelo to upset Femi. I think putting Oba away from the North American title, allowing him to do some non-title work for a while, and then moving him up to the NXT championship makes all the sense in the world. And D'Angelo is most certainly ready to hold a more significant title than the Heritage Cup, and the men's North American championship is a great option for him. My problem, though, is that they've barely built this. They did a couple things behind the scenes where they, looked at each other interrupting the other's promos, and they had one in-ring segment. And that's pretty much been it. So had this been built for 6 weeks with multiple interactions and attacks and, Oba destroying the D'Angelo family and then Tony confronting him, something like that, I probably would have bought in and said, you know what? I think D'Angelo is going to take the men's North American championship. But because it's been such a light build and we haven't gone that deep, I just can't say that. So I do have Femi retaining the North American title. Let's move to the women's championship. Roxanne Perez against Jada Parker. Parker, in a sit-down interview, discussed her fast year-long rise from the PC to being in a title match, and she admitted she's not 100% coming out of the gauntlet. Jada gave Roxy her flowers, but said she's not scared of the spotlight because she played soccer at LSU, and she was on the U17 national team for the United States. Parker talked her talk, leading Perez to interrupt, pointing out all of her challengers have the exact same story, and they all end the same way too, with disappointment. Roxy said Jada will be a future champion one day, but she's not the prodigy, and she's about to find out that there is no one better than Perez. Parker then stood up and slapped the shit out of her. Pimp hand was strong. I know the audio doesn't necessarily convey the same emotion as the video, but I want to play it anyway.
I'm going to slap the taste out of your mouth.
I'd like to see you try.
I mean, she slapped the shit out of her. I absolutely love this. Easily the best part of NXT. Jada then looked off camera and pointed at someone, wondering what they're doing there, saying she heard about them and they can get some too, presumably referring to either Julia, Stephanie Vaquer, or perhaps even Delta. As if I could love Jada more than I already do. This was an extremely solid interview, but that slap on Roxy girl was not playing. What a punctuation. I maintain that Parker should have been elevated in the North American title story rather than serving as expected fodder for Perez here. But that said, as we get closer to No Mercy, I'm extremely excited to see what she can do working with Roxy. This match could elevate her in a significant way, where she slides back as a top contender for that North American title once some of the big gun free agents join the brand and kind of take over the main event. Speaking of, I love the way NXT teased the debut of Someone Sunday, almost with a wink and a nod to let the viewer know something special was coming. Parker was unfazed by whomever she saw. Perez was shook. Ain't no such thing as halfway crooks. The question, of course, is it going to be Julia? Is it going to be Vaquer? Is it going to be Delta? Here's the situation for each of them, at least the way we understand it at this juncture. Julia just finished up in Japan. I'm of the belief that unless they just planned it out so far in advance and they're really just bringing her over right away and throwing her to the wolves, there might be a little break between her, finishing up at Marigold and then coming over and actually working in NXT. They could definitely have her show up because she is free to fly to America and go ahead and be on the premium live event. So she could be there and they could just tease out that match for a month or 2 months or however long. But the other options, Delta, I believe, is already in the United States and she should be ready to go. She, of course, would be the least exciting of the three just because she's the least known of the three. The Care, of course, has already kind of made the transition out of Mexico in terms of her work. Last word was that she still needed to solidify a visa, but I don't think that means she can't do anything. I could be wrong about that. So really, it's unknown because all three are options and all three seem to have one stumbling block to being the person. No matter what they do, as long as one of them shows up, that'll be great because the truth of the matter is, look, Roxy has been doing a great job with the title, and I'm fine with her as champion. I like her heel turn. I really enjoy everything that she does. At the same time, they've been dragging out her title reign because all the people that they have expected to come in haven't made their way into the company yet. This does seem like the moment where that finally comes to a head and we get that major challenger for Perez. If I had to give a prediction, I would say Julia, just because the timing lines up so perfectly. But the Vaquer part of it, because it's been announced already and everyone has been waiting for her to show up, that could certainly work as well. And the expected main event, of course, though I could see, now that I think about it, the women's match main eventing the show. But the expected main event, the NXT Championship on the line, Ethan Page defending against Joe Hendry. Ava backstage admonished Page for putting hands on a referee last week. He suggested a suspension, while she said she would figure some stuff out. It got heated between them, as it always does. Hendry came out for another concert in the main event. Unfortunately, look, this one just straight up sucked. Not a single funny line. Ironic, because one of the lyrics was Ethan sucks. Page interrupted, but to Hendry's credit, the crowd, which didn't buy into the concert, taunted Page through his entire promo by singing the chorus to that song even as he spoke. Page powered through, expert level stuff, saying Hendry is not an NXT superstar and doesn't belong anywhere near the title. Ava interrupted with an announcement. There will be a special guest referee for the match. The fans called it by chanting for Trick Williams, who came out in a striped muscle shirt. Hendry ducked a belt shot and chokeslammed Page, with Williams counting 1, 2, 3. Very funny because it was a parallel to what happened with Oro Mensah. Though it was interesting because when Trick was counting, he was just looking at the mat, like 10 feet from where the pinfall was taking place, nowhere near the shoulders. Someone is going to need to teach him, or I should say coach him up, on how to be a referee. Then they danced together as Hendry waved the title side to side in the air. Dunn backstage said Williams would not make it to next Tuesday's NXT. While I was immensely disappointed in Hendry's concert, the segment absolutely hit by the time it ended. Most impressive to me was Page's ability to power through that speech, enrage himself further, and actually work the live fan reaction into his promo. Like I said, it was expert level veteran stuff from him. The special guest referee gimmick, it is sensible given what Page has been doing to NXT referees, though putting Trick in that role, to me, it feels a little bit forced. Why can't this guy be removed from the main event for a few months? Like, why is he still all the way around it, even when he's not actually wrestling in the match? It would have been perhaps more fun to involve the WWE superstar, someone with name value, instead of Trick. Now, when it comes to evaluating this match, there's actually a ton of different ways this can transpire. The most obvious, given Tuesday's booking, is Dunn taking out Williams, resulting in another referee coming in to count the fall. Adding intrigue to this is the fact that Page's former tag team partner in TNA, Josh Alexander, they were the North Tag Team. He is not only currently feuding with Hendry in TNA, but he is challenging for the TNA title on Friday. So he could factor in here as either a backup guest referee or maybe just someone who impacts the match out of the crowd. Ending NXT with Page and Alexander holding up their respective championships would be an insane visual if they executed that. Now, there was a period of time as this feud was building where I thought there was a real possibility Hendry would beat Paige for the NXT title. The last couple of weeks, though, they have me feeling otherwise. And look, maybe it's just me, but I've already had my fill of Hendry's gimmick, at least the version that we're getting in NXT. There needs to be additional depth to it for this character to succeed long-term in a real meaningful way. It's funny and cheeky and different, but it is immensely one note. I also don't see the necessity in strapping him up. It's not like Hendry has been driving ratings of late, and you need to put the strap on this guy because you got to get him on TV every single week. Adding him to NXT has brought some nice variety, but outside of a WWE Royal Rumble appearance for shits and giggles, I just don't really see him being a long-term value add to WWE. Again, maybe I'm wrong, but it just reminds me in some ways of broken Matt Hardy in that the character had been played long enough where, okay, it was cool that it developed an audience and a fan base, and it might be nice to feature it for a bit on WWE television, but long-term, it's going to wear on the audience because everything that could be done has been done already. Just 3 months ago, this would have been wild and inconceivable. This match, an AEW wrestler fighting a TNA wrestler in the main event of a WWE premium live event for one of its brand's top titles. It is crazy how things can change in this business so quickly. Ultimately, when it comes to a prediction for the match, I gotta believe Paige is retaining the title here through some level of shenanigans. He's had a solid run. It should only get better from here. Ultimately, it does seem like Trick will be the person to beat him for the title, but I really don't want that happening anytime soon. I will repeat, they strapped up Trick because they felt they needed to, and that was fine because Ilya Dragunov was moving off the brand and Carmelo Hayes was moving off the brand and Trick was massively over. But from a developmental standpoint, he was nowhere near ready to carry the title, and I still don't feel like he's in that spot. So if I had the pencil and I was booking the damn territory here, I have Paige winning, Trick obviously moving into a feud with Dunn, hopefully Trick moving into a feud with some other people, and I don't exactly know when I would bring him back in front of the title. Maybe NXT deadline at the end of the year, maybe even waiting until Stand and Deliver in 2025, but I would keep Trick from the NXT title, at least for the near term and maybe even for the foreseeable future. So that is our full breakdown of NXT No Mercy from an Ultimate Preview standpoint. All that leaves is our discussion over the pre-show expectation grade. And I look at the card, 6-match card, solid, certainly better than the main roster, 1 match better than the main roster. It seems to be a quality card. It is not one of those sets of NXT matches where you say, man, this is going to over-deliver. There's not, for example, a Becky Lynch, Tiffany Stratton match on this card, something the equivalent of that. Pretty much all of the title matches, and I tried to pick one title change for you, and I gave you, potential reasons other ones might transpire. But it really feels like you're going to get 5 title retentions and an obvious winner in the NXT TNA match between Wesley and Zach Wentz. Maybe there are some prizes in store. Maybe what happens with Roxanne Perez after the NXT women's title match, maybe there is more than one new woman who debuts on the roster, and it's this notable, memorable moment that all of a sudden changes NXT forever. But again, you're coming into this, and outside of a special guest referee, there's 0 stipulations, 4 singles title matches on the line, one of which, again, just my opinion, Lonnie and Wendy shouldn't be on the show. I don't think it's quality enough to be on a premium live event. And Lonnie, by the way, has been on every premium live event since she's won that Women's North American Championship. And I just ultimately don't think that this is going to be one of those shows that over-delivers where we look back on it and say, man, how could we doubt Shawn Michaels? This dude is Booker of the Year, clearly. Now, my mindset on Shawn's booking does not change. NXT on Tuesday was a super entertaining show. They had a couple speed bumps a few months ago, but they have completely righted the ship and back week to week now. This has been a very entertaining and fun show to watch. Again, I'm not down on NXT No Mercy. I just don't think it's going to be like an A show. And there's really nothing wrong with that because not every special event that you put on is going to be an A or A-. So I'm coming into this with a pre-show expectation grade of a B+, 87 out of 100. That is still kind of assuming that it over-delivers a little bit for what the card presents. But by the time we get to Sunday, who the hell knows, man? NXT has surprised us before. They most certainly could surprise us again. Now, you will have an opportunity to share your pre-show expectation grade when we post a poll hour or so ahead of NXT No Mercy on our Twitter account at Getting Overcast. In fact, you'll be able to do the exact same thing on Saturday because we will post a pre-show expectation grade poll for WWE Bash in Berlin before that premium live event on Saturday afternoon. So a reminder, obviously, we still have your WWE Bash in Berlin Ultimate Preview in the podcast feed. You can listen to that if you have not already. Saturday, as soon as that goes off the air or shortly thereafter, we will have your WWE Bash in Berlin instant analysis. And Sunday, as soon as NXT No Mercy goes off the air, we will have an instant analysis for that premium live event as well. That wraps up this edition of the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. On the way out, allow me to remind you that this show
It's all about the fire.
So head over to Apple Podcast and Spotify, leave a 5-star rating on Apple, take a little extra time, leave a 5-star written review. If you do, we will read it live right here on the show. I already mentioned all the reasons you can follow us on Twitter at Getting Overcast. Of course, you get episode drops. You can leave comments and questions for the show. All that you can vote, of course, in the polls for the PLEs. Please don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube at Getting Overcast as well. And please also remember,
I happen to love the number 5.
I hope you do as well, because for $5 a month or $50 for the entire year, you can become an official Getting Overhead. Visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Sign up. You get the fastest 5 minutes in professional wrestling, instant reactions to every major show, and exclusive news posts on Friday. Again, that is buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Please support the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. Thank you all for listening to this edition of the program. This is the Silver King signing off, leaving you with just 3 final words. Bye for now.